Welcome to this meeting of the Victoria chapter of the Australian Academy of Liturgy. It gives me great pleasure to welcome our speaker for this meeting, the Reverend Melanie Walley. Mel is priest in charge of the parish of Toronto in the Anglican Diocese of Newcastle. She's married to Angus and they have 3 children, Amelia, Gabriel, who is deceased, and Joseph. Liturgies for rites of passage are important for the great turning points in life. And in the human experience, the Church has distilled these into our ceremonies and rituals and liturgies for birth, marriage, and death. But what happens when a joyfully accepted life transition is disrupted? We're fortunate to have with us Mel Walley to explore with us an area of relatively slim provision for pastoral ritual and liturgical expression. This is a deeply personal presentation, exploring early pregnancy loss. This is an experience that encompasses miscarriage, ectopic, molar, and any other loss that may occur prior to 20 weeks gestation. Different types and experiences of early pregnancy loss mean parents may have very specific spiritual needs. The language we use when listening to their needs is crucial at such a vulnerable time for parents. And existing provision for funerals for children often reflect themes that don't map very well to the complex experience of early pregnancy loss. In her presentation today, Mel will reflect on her personal experience of early pregnancy loss, which prompted her to develop connections with other women and families. Her awareness was drawn to the challenges of adapting existing pastoral and liturgical resources for this experience, and this led her to begin composing liturgies for families where early pregnancy loss had occurred. Wider implications for pastoral and theological formation of clergy and pastoral carers will be explored, and particularly the development of deep listening skills appropriate for the experience of early pregnancy loss. Please welcome Mel Walley.
Hi everyone. Thank you, Karen, for inviting me to speak today on this deeply personal topic that I am deeply passionate about as well. Beginning with my personal experience of early pregnancy loss, in January of 2016, I lost my baby Gabriel to ectopic pregnancy at 7 weeks gestation. An ectopic pregnancy is a pregnancy that occurs outside of the womb, and in my case, it was a tubal pregnancy. The experience itself was quite horrific in a number of ways, and some of which I will not go into detail here. The day I found out involved being told by a specialist in the hospital that it may be a miscarriage or you may go on to have a normal pregnancy. All this after she burst through the door, excited to tell me I was definitely pregnant. But that only led me to burst into tears because I knew I was losing my baby. Then she didn't seem to understand why her words of comfort were like shards of glass penetrating my skin when she replied, "I know it isn't good, but at least we know your body is doing the right thing and you can get pregnant." Hence, I cried harder. I was sent to an appointment to be assessed the following week, and I was sent home with an ultrasound form. From there, I got an emergency appointment for an ultrasound that happened to be that afternoon. And then I thought my world was already turned dark. I found out it was an ectopic pregnancy and was sent straight to the closest tertiary hospital emergency room. Within 15 minutes of arriving, I was in a theatre gown and being assessed for rupture and internal bleeding. My world was spinning, but one thing I knew was that the only life at that point I'd cared about was my baby's. I ended up being admitted for 4 days where they monitored my bloods every day to see what my HCG levels were doing. And we were left with the choice on the last day before discharge whether we would choose surgery or an injection of methotrexate to terminate the pregnancy. The whole time during my stay in hospital, I was in a 4-bed ward sharing with other women who were in for various other reasons. I wasn't treated like a bereaved mother, but more like a medical emergency. No one acknowledged my baby. No one gave me any information for support groups or any type of bereavement support for when I was home. The grief and the guilt were so intense that I laid there wishing I could die and let my baby live, even though that was physically impossible. This continued for months afterwards as well. A bit of context is that I had been conducting funerals for 1.5 years when this all occurred. And I remember sitting in my hospital bed feeling absolutely lost about how to proceed with grief when I can't have a funeral, knowing that this is a rite of passage where God meets the human experience. I was at a loss also because I was about to say goodbye to my baby, yet this baby couldn't be anointed for the journey either. I was also very confused because I was thrust into the question of, is my baby considered a baby? And I never imagined that I would have such strong emotions and experience this type of loss as a death of a child at 7 weeks gestation. I questioned how I could feel this way, but my baby was lost so early. I even wondered if God sees my baby as a baby. Yes, I went there too. I had no way of moving forward in my grief, and I was seeking validation and permission to grieve, and at the same time protecting my right to grieve. Like many other mothers, I was very reactive to anything that sounded dismissive of my grief. For example, the term early pregnancy loss is different to stillbirth. In those times, I would experience as dismissive and distressing. Now I understand those differences to be nuances and that these do not always equate to less or more grief. Author and speaker Rachel Lewis speaks so eloquently of her experience of an ectopic pregnancy and her recurrent pregnancy loss. Rachel has a degree in theology and in communications, and her words in her online Wave of Light ceremony sum up these nuances beautifully. I adapted them with her written permission to a Wave of Light ceremony I held in 2016. Her adapted words that relate to the nuances of grief with early pregnancy loss go like this. For you who lost your child or children early in gestation, and sometimes wonder if your loss counts. For you who have lost many children, and the pain and burden you feel is just overwhelming. For you who remember all too well, then some days not enough, what it feels like to hold the shell of your child in your arms, here but gone. For you who never got to meet or hold your child. For you who are locking in arms, holding tight, clinging to everyone around you for support. For you who feel alone, oh, so alone. For you who had to bury your child. And for you who never had the chance. I learned that grief is not defined by how long you knew someone. We are conditioned to believe that grief equates to how long you know someone, when it is actually how much you love someone. When I shared my story, my healing came through mothers who gave me permission to grieve by sharing their stories of stillbirth and tragic adult deaths. They never judged my grief because of my early pregnancy loss. They gave me permission to just be. When someone is devastated by having to bury their child, there is sometimes an equal and opposite experience in early pregnancy loss. Never having the chance to bury your child to lay them to rest. Though this is definitely not everyone's experience, it was mine, and I also met some other mothers who felt the same. There is a picture I will share with you of a burial I'll just get that up on screen. So this is a picture from one mother in the UK, shared with permission for use for this very purpose. She shared this picture to show everyone that their baby too could have the dignity of having a funeral and burial. So burial is not always an option for early pregnancy loss if there are no remains. These are twin ectopic babies who died at 8 weeks gestation. It's also very common in the UK, more common than some parts of the world. Hospital chapel services will actually do, the hospital will keep the remains of babies and do a cremation, and also have special services where they lay the ashes to rest in special gardens at the hospital and invite parents to that service periodically. That is very common in the UK. So even though I had written and held a memorial service, I was still left with this deep yearning to bury my child and to lay them to rest. I didn't have any remains, so this was impossible. So it was not until I gave voice to the reason behind this yearning that made healing possible. Having trained to conduct funerals in the bush, where there were more burials than cremations, it's the moment in the liturgy where the real process of letting go occurs. I never got that moment of that final moment. The part of the liturgy where you sometimes see families at the grave's edge on their knees, weeping inconsolably as their child is lowered. Over these last 5 years, I've met online and in person many people who have been through an early pregnancy loss. Not everyone experiences it the same. Some minimize their loss, others grieve very privately to protect themselves, while some also do not have the same deep connection to their baby. Some experience it as a death, some as a huge disappointment, some as a brief disappointment, some as dashed hopes, and some as all three. The other is relief when it's not the right time or the circumstances are not right. The experiences vary from person to person and between family members. However, it's becoming more and more known to be experienced as a death. Society is changing how it views the grief of early pregnancy loss. Those of us who do grieve very deeply are becoming more known. Births, deaths, and marriages, now in almost every state in Australia, provides commemoration certificates for early pregnancy loss. Support groups are growing, and all this would not be if there was not a need. So I was wondering for discussion if, Kieran, did we want to do breakout rooms? Do we have enough people for breakout rooms, or do we want to do discussion together?
Certainly we can do breakout rooms if you'd like. How many people would you like to put in each room?
How many have we got in total?
26.
Groups of 4?
Groups of 4 can be done.
Wonderful. Probably 8 minutes or 6 minutes, actually. It gives us enough time to wrap up.
So folks, you will be automatically assigned to a breakout room. Please accept the invitation when it appears on your screen.
So in the breakout room, it's basically a discussion of your experience with this topic. Okay, well, thank you everyone for those discussions. They were really good, and it really highlighted the need for validation and being able to open these spaces to speak about grief and have that acknowledged. In my next section, I'll speak about pastoral ritual and liturgy. A theological reflection for a liturgy for early pregnancy loss is about allowing the human experience to just be as it is. Although Job's suffering and his friends could easily fit within this scenario, there are people that abandoned Job, and the friends that did follow him sat with him and wept for a full week. However, when Job began to speak, their words and actions added to Job's pain. When it feels like speaking results in more pain due to the words and actions of another, it inhibits the ability to grieve in connection with one another. It leaves us stuck in grief and can exacerbate it. Whereas the Book of Psalms, where every emotion is welcomed, nothing is left unsaid, and the theological emphasis behind a liturgy for early pregnancy loss. The Psalms are a conversation of the heart, where everything is brought to speech before God. It is a faith that understands that God is participating and attentive to the darkness and the deep pain of life. Early pregnancy loss fits within what Walter Brueggemann calls the disorientation psalms, the psalms that relate to the human experience. A liturgy for early pregnancy loss is the safe place to express what is upon the heart before God without the verbal assault from well-meaning people. It enables grief to be expressed and sets the person or people on the way to a new orientation that includes integrating the experience and their child into their life in a new way that lets them also begin to experience comfort, consolation, and hope. With this theological reflection in mind, the objective for an early liturgy for early pregnancy loss is to provide validation and permission for the grief to be expressed. It is an important corrective to our broader cultural dismissal of the complex grief that accompanies early pregnancy loss. Though there is a movement within society for the acceptance of grief of early pregnancy loss, seen through the growth of charities such as SANS Australia, Bears a Hope, and Red Nose Australia, to incorporate early pregnancy loss in their campaigns. I found the framework of the funeral service for an infant of the Prayer Book of Australia useful and as a basis for the liturgy I constructed. Though the human experience of early pregnancy loss can be a different human experience to the death of an infant. With the death of the child, where there are remains, the funeral ritual of what we do with the coffin, walking in and walking out, and being able to place our hand on the coffin as a celebrant, and we pray the farewell prayer in front of the family, are all symbolic and ritual actions. When early pregnancy loss is experienced as a death, these symbolic rituals are not able to be present. They may not speak to the person's experience either if they experience it only as dashed hopes and disappointment. This makes using the APBA as the only source problematic in that it may not speak directly to this different human experience. So through my interactions with others, and I began to name some rituals in liturgy that would really speak to the human experience. Again, a framework to work from, to include and exclude options and to adapt where needed. The liturgy includes an option to name the baby. This came about through my interactions with others in support groups and through grief counselling for early pregnancy loss, where I found out naming your baby is a way to help facilitate the grief. Some people name their baby, and some as baby followed by their surname. Either way, this gives space for this baby to have a place within the human family, and also that God knows this baby by name. A commemoration certificate from births, deaths, and marriages can also be used with the baby's name on it. It helps with the acknowledgement and validation. It may also ease spiritual distress from families that wonder what happens to their child when they die before being baptized, or even if they are with God. This ritual affirms our connection and relationship with the baby within our relationship with our relationship with our triune God. A candle may be lit from the Paschal candle as a reminder for the family that this baby is with God and part of their family. The liturgy includes healing action as well. Anointing of parents, if a mother and father is present, or a mother, or can be adapted to family too. The action of being anointed by the priest is for the road ahead in grief, an acknowledgement that God participates in and is attentive to our grief, and to bring comfort and consolation as we journey through the dark valleys. The next action is for the parents or family anointing each other. This symbolizes even when their experiences may be different of the same situation, they are to remain connected and embrace each other where they are at on the journey. This came about with the high number of mothers struggling with their partners' different way of grieving, and the number of a high number of divorces or separations after this type of human experience. Actually located within the heading of healing action, which may fit better within the commendation, is another action that may help facilitate grief, where the priest may bring a candle over and hand it to the parents, saying, "May Christ be the light for your journey. May Christ's love warm you and encourage you." If there are other people present, this is where they join together to lay hands for a prayer for the journey, which is on page 7 of the liturgy for early pregnancy loss. This is opposite to Job's struggle with his friends. This is an important corrective to our broader cultural dismissal of the complex grief that accompanies early pregnancy loss. It can bring the grieving consolation and hope, and reminds us that we're not doing this in isolation. So I thought we would have another discussion on the pastoral ritual and liturgy side for early pregnancy loss. So I was wondering if we could probably do groups of 4 again, Kieran?
Certainly. This will be different groups of 4.
Yeah.
And when the invitation comes on the screen, please do accept the invitation to the breakout room. And we are starting now.
Thank you, Kieran. Let's continue. So this next section, I'm going to talk about deep listening. So it's important to formulate a liturgy, particularly for early pregnancy loss. It requires us to listen deeply. Self-awareness is crucial, as you may have a different perception of the experience than the person in front of you. Some of our life experiences can block our ability to listen deeply to the other person. It is also important to be able to reflect back what is being said and to reflect back feelings to gauge where the other person is at. So based on what you're hearing will help you gauge whether to offer a liturgy which emphasizes with a particular emphasis and whether adaptations are needed. Whether the liturgy would take the form of the experience of the death of a baby, will be an expression of disappointment, and new orientation through prayer, or the experience of dashed hopes, or maybe it may encompass all 3. When I had my ectopic pregnancy, there were a number of clergy around me who felt helpless. This was something, as they felt, this was something they do not understand. In fact, I was also at a spiritual care, pastoral care conference in Sydney in 2019, where the topic of children and death was briefly spoken about. One person in the room, bravely, might I add, jumped up and said, "I just don't know what to say." Firstly, when you know you're not there to fix people and you know you're there to just be you and to let them truly just be who they are too, what can go wrong? It does take a great deal of self-awareness and the awareness of the other, who is another person with thoughts and feelings that may or may not resonate with your own perceptions of early pregnancy loss. It is important to note that our use of language needs to resonate with their human experience. Speaking from my experience of an ectopic pregnancy and watching interactions in online support groups, mothers can be particularly sensitive to any language that feels dismissive. When we cannot protect our live children, we fiercely protect the memory of our children who have gone before us. For example, a note from my observation in an online support group is to avoid the term unborn for miscarriage. Miscarriage is a birth experience for some women if they don't opt for a D&C. When I was looking for biblical passages to meet the human experience of ectopic pregnancy, the common go-to passages that mention womb were not appropriate either. I found some verses of the Psalms of Lament and Isaiah 43, 1-4, very fitting for my experience. So it's important for deep listening and to our perceptions of early pregnancy loss. It can be experienced as a death. It can be experienced as dashed hopes. It can be experienced as disappointment as well. And it can be all three. And these experiences, although our own personal experience may not match the person in front of us, it's very important to listen and to be able to be self-aware enough to know what's going on inside you as you're talking to the other person as well, and being able to reflect back to them what is actually going on for them and what it is they need to address their needs. So I thought for this last part, whether discussion could be a question time. If anyone's got any questions about liturgy, about this liturgy in particular, or any type of question about anything that has been raised or discussed today.
Thanks, Mel. As we head into the discussion phase of the meeting, let me just let people know how we're going to manage this. If you have something you want to say, please use the raise hand function, which you'll find in reactions in the toolbar on Zoom, or just send a chat message to everyone and I will call on you to speak. Firstly, let me say, Mel, thank you for a very informative and deeply personal and profound reflection, and for sharing your liturgy for early pregnancy loss. I think this is a very important area of liturgical provision that has become more needed as our understanding of early pregnancy loss has changed. And I was reflecting in a breakout group that a few years ago I was involved in composing a liturgy for a family that had had a stillbirth in the late 70s, early 80s. And the parents were basically told, well, that's just bad luck, go home and try again. And that then became the unspoken thing in the family that hung over their life together for a very long time, until the day came in this parish situation where they were able to speak and ask for some liturgical acknowledgement of it. I think Catherine Boyer has something to say, but it looks like she's off to parish council. Would anybody else like to speak? Sophie, you've raised your hand.
Thank you. I wanted to say thank you, Mel. It's touched so many points, and particularly experiences of friends and family. I just thought it was a very sensitive and beautifully presented topic. I really liked your emphasis on, as I said to you in the chat room, it's not about the length of time you grieve, it's about how much you love. And I love that. I'll take that away with me. The other thing I really appreciated was that deep listening and allowing the space for families to do, to express themselves, and for us to really listen about even what's not being said, and the power of ritual actions as well. But I wondered also, my question is, would you mind explaining a little bit more about the wave of light? You mentioned that early on, and I don't know what it is, and I'll be very grateful for some explanation.
Yes, thank you. The Wave of Light is a ceremony that's held at 7 p.m. on Pregnancy and Infant Loss Remembrance Day. Pregnancy and Infant Loss Remembrance Day is an international date. So the Wave of Light begins on the international date line at 7 p.m. So it's supposed to create a wave of light where we hold a candle, lighting a candle for an hour. So it's supposed to go around, circle around the world. So Pregnancy and Infant Loss Remembrance Day has only just this year been passed through Parliament, federal Parliament here in Australia, to be formally recognised. Yeah.
Melanie, do we have a date for it?
Oh, sorry, 15th of October.
Thank you.
Yeah. So yes, I ended up doing a Wave of Light ceremony on Pregnancy and Infant Loss Remembrance Day in 2016. And this was something that was a bit experimental. No one has ever done it. Not a church has ever done it, but people like the charity organisations have done similar things. But this was the first time a church has ever had a go at this that I know of anyway. So I did hold one. We held it in the Garden of Innocence up at the cemetery in Muswellbrook when I was in Muswellbrook. And I ended up on the newspaper, in the front page of the newspaper, local newspaper, and we had 27 or 29 people from the town turn up to attend. So it really was, it was special, and it was very awe-inspiring of what God can do, basically.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Nathan has his hand raised.
Well, thanks so much for your presentation. One of the things that I've noticed is it's still quite common for a lot of people to say, oh, we're not telling anybody about the pregnancy yet in case we lose it. And then when they do lose it, they're then in a real bind, because now they actually want people to know, but they actually made the decision that they were going to do this alone if they did. And of course, then it's very difficult to ask anybody to help with any kind of pastoral ritual or anything like that, because we decided not to do that. Do you have any comments about that, or about that attitude, or how we address that with people?
So that's a common, I remember my first pregnancy, who I gave birth to my live daughter, and I'm very grateful for. My doctor telling me, you may want to keep, may not want to tell anyone until 12 weeks, because, miscarriages are this common, 1 in 4, you lose 1 in 4 to miscarriage. So basically he was preparing me that this pregnancy may not end up being, but what it also did is that very effect that you talk about, Nathan, is if I did lose a pregnancy, I'd have no support around me. So I'm finding that there's been a bit of a backlash against that, against the 12-week rule, they call, and people are speaking up and announcing pregnancies a bit earlier. I still think it takes, it's a brave thing to do, because sometimes you're just not quite sure. You're very vulnerable, that you're not quite sure whether this will, especially if you've lost one, or whether this will progress into a child that you'll have in your family alive forever. So it's kind of, it's not very convenient to not announce a pregnancy early. It's not very convenient for most parents to not announce a pregnancy early, I've found. And there is a bit of a backlash against that, and saying, do it, because this is why, because you miss those people, the supportive community around you when it doesn't work out and when you lose your baby. Yeah.
Colleen O'Reilly has contributed something in the comments. Colleen, would you like to give voice to that, please?
Thank you, Kieran. I've just put up reference to a very simple liturgy that I devised and have used a number of times, and was actually published. So I just thought it might be of use to people to know that there is something in print that you can take and make more useful or better.
And the reference is to a book called Grieving an Unborn Child.
No, that's the name of the liturgy. It's
sorry.
the book is Lifting Women's Voices.
Lifting Women's
Voices. Edited by a group of women some years ago and published in 2009.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that, Colleen.
Great. Beverly, you've put something in the chat, and I wonder if you'd like to speak to that just for a moment, please.
Well, it was because of Nathan's question in our discussion that the parents of my goddaughter went through a pretty rough time with the in vitro, and they did get part of the way down the journey with that. And I just wondered whether some of the not telling anybody we're pregnant comes out of that. The difficulties that, in vitro fertilization has been a wonder in many respects, but for many couples, it's also very fraught with a lot of grief along the way. And does this feed, is that another part of this whole area that needs care and consideration, because it is so hard sometimes. I just saw, I'm raising it as a question, not as anything further.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Beverly. It can be a lot of things encompassing grief when it comes to the roller coaster journey of in vitro fertilization, and there needs to be more provision even for that specialty as well. And that would be, and I think Enriching Our Worship 5, I think, may have some liturgical resources. I wouldn't say that it's complete and perfect like every liturgy would be, expect every liturgy to be, but it's they do have some resources, and I think it is mentioned too. So infertility is another whole aspect of grief to do with parenting that needs to be it can be made into a liturgy as well, and rituals as well. Yeah.
Sophie, I see you have a raised hand.
Yeah, Mel, I just wondered if you'd like to speak about if you've had any experience when you've been talking to others about whether parents feel guilt at their baby dying early, if there's, like, even though it's not their fault, but how would you manage that? What sort of pastoral care would you be able to give to that situation? And I'm sure that would happen quite a lot, with parents would be thinking, if only I'd done something, this may not have happened.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for raising that, because it is very important aspect of that happens so often with grief around early pregnancy loss and losing babies and infants even. The guilt, I can speak from maternal experience and from my experience of the guilt, it was quite bad because I had to end the life of my baby for me to live. So that really exacerbated, I think, the feeling of guilt. What didn't help me was people trying to take the guilt away by saying, it's not your fault. It wasn't your fault. It's still not, your head and your heart don't match. In your head, it's impossible to be, to have guilt. But in your heart, you feel the maternal guilt. For pastorally, it's about acknowledging that it's there. It's validating that you have the guilt there. And what I've found helpful for me was, well, pastorally, other people reflecting that guilt back to me, that was what I was feeling, and allowing it to just be. Allowing it to just be allows you to process it, and you move through it eventually. And then your heart and head starts to match. Yeah.
I have space for one last question, comment, or reflection, and then we will be coming to the end of our time together. And I see Trish Hyatt has her hand raised. So Trish, very briefly.
A number of years ago, they thought one of my children was a Downs child, and thank God he wasn't, but all signs pointed to it. So I had an amniocentesis with my next child, so if there was anything the matter with it, we'd be able to prepare the other children. There were 15 women sitting around the table at the hospital discussing the amniocentesis, and the general topic of conversation was, when are you going to have your termination? If there's something the matter with your child. And I was floored. I really was. When they got back to me, I just said, well, I'm not. I said, I just want to be able to prepare my other children. Of course, at that stage, we had 5. This was the 6th. And I just said I wanted to be able to prepare the other children if there was something the matter with this one. But the other 14 were all going to terminate if something was the matter with the baby. Sorry, Melanie, I'm not having a go at you. It didn't matter what was the matter. They were going to terminate.
Yeah. Now, thank you for sharing that, Trish, because it really highlights the difference between the medical care, being in the medical field without any sort of bereavement or spiritual care, and or social work even, when they don't align with the experiences of the person, and they should be treating the whole person and not treating, it's very clinical, and that clinicalness can really have really compound grief, and it can also give us some really bad experiences in the medical field when we're receiving treatment.
We have space for one last, and this will be Colleen, who has her hand raised.
In the group, a small group, I made reference to being part of a group making a submission on the part of the Anglican Diocese to change the abortion law in Victoria. And one of the things we discovered, which I wasn't aware of, was that at 20 weeks now, it's possible to tell conditions that simply cannot be allowed to go to term. And what our group found was that doctors wanted the termination moved out of the criminal law into medical law for the reason that they wanted a window of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, for people to come to terms with the news if they were being told your child isn't going to survive, or this pregnancy can't be allowed to continue for medical reasons. They wanted people to have time to come to terms with it. I think it's terribly fraught, and it's wonderful that there's a lot more pastoral sensitivity around this now. It's intensely personal. In my experience.
Yeah, it is. It is intensely personal, and that the very need for pastoral care and spiritual care in that space. In support groups, I've seen the space of opting for termination quite quickly, waiting a week in termination, also seen people carry to term as well, or to when the time comes. And it's really, it needs to be a personal choice for these people.
Yeah, because now we know things that even 10, 20, 30, certainly 50 years ago when I was having children were not known. They were not knowable, but now they are.
Yep, that's right. Yep. Yeah.
Thank you, Colleen, and especially thank you, Melanie. This has been very sacred ground for us today. Before we end the meeting, I just have a couple of things to share so that people know what's coming up. Firstly, I'd like to just give an update about our upcoming national conference. Early bird tickets are presently available for the AAL National Conference. Since our last chapter gathering, we have decided to hold the conference online. This has been brought about because of the Delta variant and uncertainty about people being unable to travel, or if they're able to travel, being uncertain of being able to go home. So we have decided to go for the conference as an online event rather than as in person. The conference will take place from 11 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Saving Time on Tuesday the 18th, Wednesday the 19th and Thursday the 20th of January 2022. Online sessions will be complemented with local in-person gatherings organised by the state chapters. There are a couple of good things that follow from this. We will still be using open space technology, which has proven very, very good and adaptable to the online space. And we held an online meeting using that process in January just past. Our keynote speakers, who are Amelia Coe-Butler, Brooke Prentice and Charissa Sully, will be joining us for live forums. And best of all, mindful as I am that every conference I've attended in the Academy has had someone stand up at the members' meeting and say, it's awfully expensive to come to conferences these days. This is possibly the least costly conference the Academy has put on in recent years. Ticket prices have plummeted 90% from where they were set just in June. It has never been cheaper to come to an Academy conference. Early bird tickets are available right now, and I'm putting the booking link in the chat so that everybody can click on it right now. That will take you to the booking page, and early bird tickets are priced at $40 for Academy members and $45 for guests. As I said, you'll never get a better deal. So please do click on the booking link and sign up today. Our next chapter meeting of the Victoria chapter will be held 4:30 p.m. on Wednesday, the 10th of November. Our speaker will be Father Anthony Doran, who will be well known to members of the chapter as a former convener and as a past president of the Academy. Father Tony will be presenting a paper titled, "But the Pope Said, Pope Francis, the Church and the Extraordinary Form." Father Tony's reflection will touch on recent developments in the regulation of older rites in the Catholic Church, following on from Pope Francis's recent motu proprio, Traditiones Custodes. The presentation will reflect on the ways in which liturgy relates with ecclesiology, a topic that is central to the wider renewal of the liturgy, and I promise you is wildly interesting from an ecumenical perspective. Registration is open on Eventbrite right now, and I encourage you to sign up today. Nathan, you have your hand raised. You can have a moment right now, if you like.
Just really briefly, Kieran, I just wanted to say at the conference, for those of you who are panicking, thinking, oh my God, I can't do 3 6-hour meetings on Zoom. Conferences are never 6 6-hour meetings, and this will be no different. You just go to the sessions that you want to, exactly the same as you would if it was a real life conference. So think of it as a series of meetings that you pick and choose from. That's all.
Thank you, Nathan. That's a really important clarification. You can come and go. You can have break time. That's the wonderful thing. Before we go our ways, let us pray together. God, our Creator, you have made each one of us in every part. Bless us through and through, that we may delight to serve you to the full. Bless our eyes, that we may discern the beauty you give. Bless our ears, that we may hear you in the music of sounds. Bless our sense of smell, that your fragrance may fill our being. Bless our lips, that we may speak your truth and sing your joy. Bless our hands, that they may play, write, and touch as you guide them. Bless our feet, that they may be messengers of your peace. Bless our imaginations, that we may be fired with wonder in your truth. Bless our hearts, that they may be filled with your love. Bless us through and through, that we may delight to serve you to the full. Through Jesus Christ, who took our nature to make us whole. Amen. Let us bless the Lord. Thanks be to God.